Hi, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Eugene Turk. I'm the Vice President of Business Development at Align, and I want to welcome you to our monthly coach webinar for September 2022. Hope everyone is doing well, and thank you so much for joining us today. This morning, we are thrilled to have Wade Wyant with a presentation on making your business recession resistant, the tools that you need to thrive in any recession. For those of you who may not be familiar with Wade, he is the founder of Red Wagon Advisors and the founder of Renegades, a tech startup in cybersecurity. Red Wagon Advisors' goal is to assist businesses with implementing the good business habits that are at the core of the scaling up methodology. And Wade has helped over 100 businesses, including his own, scale to the highest level of industry maturity. His career spans over 20 years as an entrepreneur, a founder of various startups, and as a business coach. He has extensive experience in governance and leadership with a focus on technology. As an entrepreneur, he spent over a decade creating and managing various startups. He considers himself a digital native, a mentor, and a visionary. Today, his primary focus is running Red Wagon Advisors and helping small and mid-market companies as they scale into industry dominating businesses. And we are thrilled and honored to have Wade present for us this month. As always, just one administrative matter. We want to make this as educational and informational for all of you as possible. Please feel free to pose your questions using the Q&A feature while I figure out why the chat is turned off. And we will direct all of those questions to Wade at the conclusion of the presentation. So again, thank you all for attending this Align Coach webinar, and I will now turn the microphone over to Wade.
Well, thanks, Eugene, and thanks everybody for attending. You know, it's funny in today's world, doing anything live that's not taped is unique, and it's unique to have people arrive for it. So I want to thank everybody who showed up, and then everybody who's watching this video later. Thank you for taking the time to watch it. I'm excited to present and hopefully just give you a few nuggets of what I've learned along the way. I do have a bunch of slides. It's not to overwhelm you with data. It's more just to keep me on track and hopefully entertain you a little bit, so you're not just staring at me the entire time. So I'm going to share my slide deck and use that as a way to do this presentation. But again, it's not intended to overwhelm you or do any of that. It's just not overwhelm. It's not intended to be the main gist. It's just it's this deck. As Eugene said, I am a scaling up coach, and so a lot of what you see here is going to be scaling up centric. Because we use their methodology in my practice. And I did use it in my last business, a business called ITS Partners. We scaled that and I exited that in 2017. So it's a little bit of my background. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But before I get too far into talking about me and my background and why I put this presentation together, I just wanted to thank Eugene and the team at Align and Scaling Up Scoreboard for letting us be a part of this. You know, we use those tools in our practice, and we use them with our clients. It's the only scoreboard, or the only it's the only place that we go to track things like this. And I was blanking on the term, and Eugene will remind me of it later, but I want to say scoreboard, but there's another term I'm looking for. But anyways, it's a place that we go and we love it. So please, while I hope you get some good information here, make sure you're checking out that tool and using it in your practice. As I said already, this is scaling up heavy. It doesn't mean it's only scaling up. I am going to give you some principles I learned outside of scaling up during this process. But you're going to see a few slides you may have seen in Vern's presentations in the past, but a lot of new ones as well. And I will be referring to some of the scaling up tools as well. So if you're interested in those, you can find them on the Scaling Up website. They're all accessible and available. The Scaling Up tools, you just go down there and you give Vern your email address, and he'll send you the tools. So just be aware of that. A little bit about me before we get into the principles. And I'm only doing this not to advertise myself, but to give you some background on why I did this presentation and why I did it in the way I did it. I did scale my own business. I wrote a book called Wake Up Call. And it's funny, I wrote this prior to even the recession being something people were talking about in a significant way. Obviously, we've been talking about recessions for the last 10 years because we've been expecting it for a while, and it hasn't hit, because recessions typically hit between 5 and 10 years, and we haven't had one for 15 now, or just about 15, 14. And in my book, Wake Up Call, I didn't talk about all the things I did right as an entrepreneur. I actually talked about all the things I did wrong. And so it's a different perspective. Most people talk about all the things you need to know about entrepreneurship, and I talk about all the things to avoid. So please go get my book. I'd appreciate that. It's the cheapest thing you can buy for me. So check the book out. But I wrote the book, and then as recession talk became more and more live, I realized, or more and more real, or more and more potent in our everyday life in the last 6 to 12 months, I realized that so many lessons from Wake Up Call, which are also lessons inside of Scaling Up, could be part of a presentation. So I built this. I also built a workshop around it that I do with people. And I take a day out of people's time to plan ahead. And if you hear anything I say right now, please don't leave the webinar. Don't stop watching the video. But this is the number one thing you got to hear from me today. If you want to be recession resistant, you have to plan ahead. So I'm going to tell you the things that I did in the last recession, 2008, in my own business, and how those worked for me, and how you can learn from those things, the 5 things that I believe you should be doing now. But they're not things you need to learn today and then do when the recession hits. The things you need to do, they're not things you need to hear about today and then do when the recession hits. They're things you need to do today. You need to get started on these. And so it's another reason why I named the book Wake Up Call, because it's just, you got to get going. You got to get going now. And I was able to survive and thrive in the last recession, 2008. And that's why I feel qualified, and why I do this workshop and I do this presentation, because I want people who haven't been through a recession. There's a lot of millennial entrepreneurs out there, and then there's a lot of Generation X like myself that maybe just were either in a job or didn't own a business or weren't running a business at the time. And so I put this presentation together to help those people. And so that's why I did this and why I'm here. And yeah, so we'll get into that. With that being said, warning, these are my opinions. Some of this is based on what I've seen, and some of it's based on a lot of experience, but very little of what I'm going to tell you today is science-based, meaning I went out and I did a lot of rigor and due diligence to test all my theories. And so don't let me mess you up. Take this and think about these concepts and work on them inside your company. But I know what I'm telling you is my opinion, and I want you to know that that you need to consider all options, consider all this before making any changes to your business. And so just fair warning, this is really my opinion in a lot of ways, more than scientific stuff. So be aware of that. With that said, we're here because I want you to start that conversation inside of your business. I want you to start this conversation and start this today, as I said already. And so the slides remind you of that, because what we're going to share with you today will help you during the recession, but it won't necessarily help you, but it won't be as much of a help as if you don't do it before then. And so I want you to do this before the panic button hits. Because if you don't remember 2008, it's just so bizarre that our last recession was so long ago, because usually recessions come in 5 to 10 years. And if you look at the history of recessions, there was a good period of time where we were having them like every 8 years. And so our memory is really getting foggy on what recessions are like. And people forget that there's a real panic. And a lot of people are talking about how, well, this recession won't be as bad. And by the way, we're not in a recession yet, and I'll get to that in a second. But people are talking about how it won't be as bad. It may not be. But the psychology behind a recession is the real problem, not what actually happens. And if this is the second thing I need you to hear today, the first thing I need you to hear is start planning now, because there's things that you can do now that will make it so much easier when it hits. The second thing I need you to hear, the thing I need you really to remember from this presentation, and again, don't leave the video or leave the presentation after you hear this, but this is the second most important thing, is that if you haven't really experienced the recession full bore, or if you weren't a leader or an owner or an entrepreneur during a recession, even if you have a great business during a recession, because the news is so negative, and you're going to have a couple of friends get laid off, and maybe your kids will lose their job, or a spouse, or someone in your life, or you'll have a business across the street shut down, or a friend's business really get hit hard. That plus what the media is going to push. And remember, the media only gets kudos for giving bad news, not good news. No one gives the news that a kitten got saved from a tree. That does not make the news. The only thing that makes the news is bad news for the most part, obviously. That's a broad statement, but it's mostly true. And so between all those things, when the recession does hit, it will be so hard for you not to be in panic mode. And that's the worst time to be making decisions. So again, the other reason to do all this work now is that you will get in this mode. And the other thing I'd say to that is, look, when the panic mode hits, remember this talk, and remember it's never as bad as it seems. And most of the people around you will be talking up. And so if I can give you a lesson from what I learned, and this is not one of the 5 things, but this is an extra pro tip. What I learned during the recession in 2008 and 2009, which significantly affected my business, and we were able to survive it and thrive in it, but it was a huge effect, was that not just me, but most owners I knew around me, most entrepreneurs, most leaders of businesses, if you're not an owner or an entrepreneur, you're a leader in a business, or you run a division, you're doing something of importance if you're on this webinar. And most people, it's very hard to stay out of the panic because we're psychological beings, right? We get caught up in not the moment, but we get caught up in what's going on. So do your best to avoid the panic. But again, another reason to do this now. Now, I'm going to get into my recommendations here in a second, but I want to just make sure you guys know that a few of these things are just total captain obvious. And I want to recognize that beforehand so I don't lose credibility with you. I know I'm going to tell you some things you already know. I'm going to give you maybe some additional things to think about. I'm going to also encourage you, and I hopefully inspire you to go do something about this, because while I don't believe we're in a recession, I do believe that that when we do enter recession, and we will eventually, and we look at the market yesterday, this is for those who are watching, today's September 14th, yesterday is September 13th, we've got to have one coming in the near future. And again, I've said this in videos before, if I knew when a recession was coming, I would not be here doing these videos. I'd be investing hardcore and making a lot of money that way. But I think we can all agree something's coming. So that's why I'm gonna tell you a bunch of Captain Obvious stuff that will hopefully help you. So just keep that in mind. Second thing is I want to inspire you to think about what's going on and what you're going to do, because a lot of what I'm going to give you are things to think about before this all happens. So to the recession, for the few of the people, before I get into my recommendations, which are only 2 or 3 minutes away, for those of you waiting for the rest of the recommendations, to the naysayers out there, they're like, well, is a recession really on its way? Do we need to worry? Well, you probably didn't show up to my webinar if you don't think a recession is on its way, but just in case you're doubtful, I'm not going to feed you any stats or analytics. I'm just going to show you a couple of numbers to really make you think about the fact that we are due for recession. So dominoes have a way of falling. And let's just talk about 2008. I want you to think about where you were at. Legitimately, I know you're on a webinar. I can't see you. We can interact via the chat, but just think about for a second. 2008, where were you? What were you doing? Just take a minute. I'm going to give you 10 seconds of silence to think about where you were and what you're doing in 2008 during that recession. Okay. So 2008, President Obama was running for election. Senator John McCain was running for election. George Bush was still president. They got together in September to decide what to do because George Bush didn't want to make a decision on his own. It was mass chaos, if you don't remember. I mean, the market was tumbling, and all these articles were coming out about how there's all these fraudulent loans. That's my statement, not other people's, but basically fraudulent loans that were causing a crash. It was bananas, if you remember September and October and November of 2008. All right, now another exercise, just stick with me. This is important because this is a little bit of a mental exercise that's going to prepare you for the rest of this presentation. You just thought about what you were doing in 2008, where you were at, what was happening in your life a little bit. I'm going to give you 10 seconds of silence, and I want you to think ahead. Where will you be at, and what will you be doing in 2035? So 10 seconds of silence. Where will you be at, and what will you be doing in 2035? Okay. For most of you, and I've done this exercise many times, you probably thought, what's this Wade guy doing? Like, why, who cares about 2035? I was here to talk about here to learn about the recession and here to figure that out and get his ideas. This is probably one of the first things, third thing, I guess, that I want to share with you. You probably have no idea where you're going to be in 2035. And you're like, wait, that's so far out. I'm not even thinking that far out. We are closer to 2035 than we are to 2008. Let me say that again. We are closer to 2035 than we are to 2008. That's how long ago 2008 was. And if you don't think there's in the near future something coming, I mean, just you cannot outrace a recession. So just think that through for a second. It's been 14 years since 2008. So yeah, we're due for something to happen, whether it's next week, next month, next year, it's around the corner. So again, I'm just trying to inspire you to get ready. Now, here we are, the heart of the video. 5 key areas for you to consider. First one for me, and I'm going to get into each one of these as we go through the rest of this presentation. But to me, revenue generation is critical. And we'll get into the details around that. The second thing, and by the way, I worked on that. I'll tell you what I did in my business. Second thing is knowing your channel. How are you getting to your clients and having that well-defined? And there's reasons why, and we'll get into when we get into the channel discussion, why that's so important. When I say channel, I mean your channel to your clients. How do you get to them? Whoever buys from you. Third thing is your P&L or your income statement. And I'm going to give you some thoughts around that. This is a huge Captain Obvious. Whenever there's a recession, people go straight to their P&L, they go straight to their income statement, and they find money, they work in cash flow. This is a Captain Obvious, I know, but I'm going to talk about some of the things I did and what you need to do to prepare for this. The fourth thing I labeled resource allocation, but this really comes down to people. What are you going to do around people? And you need to think this through. And this is my opinion. Number 4 is the most important thing to do prior to it. And then number 5 for you as a leader is just for you and only for you. And as we come into a recession, I'm going to talk about the concept of doing less and saying no more, because there's no way you will successfully navigate a recession if you don't personally get number 5 right. And I'll talk about the reasons why and what you need to do. So that being said, again, you're going to notice there we're using the scaling up scheme of colors and whatnot, because we're scaling up coaching company, and we like to utilize their tools. So here we are. Focus on revenue generation. What does your core customer want? Now, again, this is Captain Obvious, but what I'm going to say next isn't Captain Obvious, and I want to make sure that you hear me loud and clear. Number 1 on revenue generation. If you want to do experimentation and you want to go and diversify, this is the time to do it, not during a recession. The number 1 mistake, in my opinion, again, this is a Wade Wyant opinion here, but the number 1 mistake I see companies make during recessions, and that I did not make, again, I was lucky, not smart. I don't want you guys to think I was smart. I made tons of mistakes. Go read Wake Up Call, and you can read about 62 of my mistakes that are in there. They're listed out, detailed, the whole bit. So I almost did this by accident. I can explain to you during a workshop or another setting if you want how I did that. But I didn't experimentate, and I didn't go out and go for diversification. And I don't mean diversification of people. I mean diversification of products and customers and whatnot. You have to be laser focused on your core customers and what you do for them. We'll get into that in a minute. This is not the time for experimentation. The problem is during a recession, you have all these great ideas, and they're normal because, again, remember, you're going to be in panic mode. And so you're going to be trying to experiment, and everybody's going to say you've got to diversify during a recession. I totally disagree. You have to focus on your core customer. They pay you on time. They love your products. If you're going to diversify, they're the ones who are going to buy whatever you diversify into. They're the ones who might be able to give you an advance payment. They're the ones who might buy more of your stuff to help you out. They're the ones who might tell you what to do to get through the recession. You have to be You have to be so in their business, so focused on your core customer, it's not even funny. But what happens is your brain goes into fight or flight mode, and either fight or flight both tell you you have to diversify. And it's a knee-jerk wrong reaction. You should not do that, because all that becomes a distraction. It's just a distraction on your time. And we'll talk about that on number 5. And you won't be able to manage through it. Just trust me, you won't. Again, my opinion. You came here today for my opinions, not necessarily scientific ways of dealing with recession, but I want you to be aware of that. I'll end on this. Your sandbox is your happy place. Inside of scaling up, and I'll show you where to go to get this information in a few seconds, but in scaling up, we talk about your sandbox, your core customer. This is your happy place. Now, what did I do during the last recession? What I did was I got laser focused on one product, one customer type, and that's all that we worked on. Of course, we took orders for other things. And of course, if there was something that came in that was high profit and easy to do, we would take an order. But as far as our marketing, our sales efforts, where we poured in any kind of investment, we focused on our core customer and our sandbox. And so as you go into a recession, if you want to be diversified, do it now. Don't wait for the recession to do the experimentation. Don't wait for the recession to have all these bright ideas. If you're going to do it, which I even argue maybe you shouldn't do it at all, you should always focus on your core customer and your hedgehog, as Jim Collins taught us. But if you're going to do it all, do it now as opposed to in the future. And so you'll get these slides at the end, but just 4 things to think about as you're wondering, what does that mean, Wade? Well, first off, know when and where. Know your core customer. Know what you're going to sell them. That's your hedgehog. And know your brand promise. So this is a thing Vern talks about all the time in scaling up. So that should be very easy. And then number 4, which is something I don't see customers do well enough, and this is something I did really well in my business, is have KPIs. Be relentless on measurements, especially during a recession. Nothing will make you sleep better at night than knowing the numbers. But too many people they'll go into a recession and they won't have the KPIs available, and they won't have them done because they didn't take the time. Get this done now. Get this taken care of. And so, just like I said earlier, Jim Collins taught us, return to your hedgehog. Make sure this is all lined out, ready to go. You've got it figured out so that you can focus on what you love, what pays well, and what you're good at. That will get you there. And that's the center of good to great. We recently saw, and I'll give you a quick example, we'll move on to the next point. We recently saw a great example of this. A guilty pleasure I have, and I'm kind of embarrassed about it, is I love going to McDonald's. And I'm not proud of it, but I'm a big McDonald's fan. I go probably once a week. I think it's because it's part of my childhood. It just makes me happy. Again, it's terrible. I know I should never be eating the food, but I go there. And during COVID, our mini recession we just had, McDonald's showed focusing on the hedgehog better than probably any other example I've ever seen. Because for years they expand their menu. They'd add stuff, little bits every year, like little bits. And for 40, 50 years, they've expanded their menu. And then you got to what they had pre-COVID in 2020, which was a pretty significant menu. As soon as COVID started, and as soon as they had to go to drive-through only, what happened to that menu? I mean, it went right back down to like 1982. I mean, you get burgers, French fries. I was surprised chicken nuggets were on there, but I guess they couldn't get rid of that. I mean, they went right back to their hedgehog, and they got laser focused on it. And there's a lot of reasons why they did that. And I don't sit in McDonald's boardroom or the corporate strategy planning, but I can imagine that was because that was their hedgehog. They knew their core customer. They knew where they could generate revenue. And when they panicked, which they did, everybody panicked, they went back to that. Know what you're going to go back to. Know what you're going to do. So that leads us to and I see a few chats popping up, and I'll try to answer those. I just want to get through my points first, and then we'll get to questions. The second point, which is on the channel, know what your number one channel is. And how I describe this is know how you will reach your core customer. This is the next thing that happens. Beyond diversification, in a recession, what usually happens is we go and we try everything. Every marketing idea that's out there, we try to sell through. We try to, okay, if we're selling online, then let's start a brick and mortar. If we got a brick and mortar, let's get online. If we sell through partners, then let's go direct to customer. If we go direct to customer, let's go sell through partners. I'm telling you, when a recession hits, that's the worst time to try to start a new channel. It's very expensive. It's very difficult. Know your channel to get into your clients so that when it hits and you have a prepared strategy to get laser focused on exactly where you're going to go. And one of the examples that Vern uses of this that I love, so I'm going to steal his example. And it wasn't necessarily during a recession, but it was during a hard time. And I want to use it to amplify why you should do this, is Facebook/Meta. If you look at Facebook/Meta when they went public in 2012, and they didn't want to go public, by the way. If you don't know this, in 2012, they had no desire to go public, but they had exceeded the number of people that had ownership in the business, or were going to, by 5,000 people, which is in the United States, you cannot have more than 5,000 people be owners of a company. If you do, then they have to go public. It's law. And so Facebook was being forced to go public because of the way they compensated people and the way they did ownership. And so they did that. And when they went public, if you look at this is a chart of market cap, which I like better than stock value. I think it shows the real value of the company. But when they went public in 2013, the market told them they had to focus on web advertising because a lot of people did stuff on the web. And they didn't do very well in the first year, if you remember. But Mark Zuckerberg said, no, we've got to be laser focused on this channel. And the channel was going mobile. You know, iPhone was out, it was catching steam. Samsung had finally gotten some phones released that were comparable. And so he knew mobile's where it was going to be at. And for the first year, he got beat up. And if you look at the chart here, I mean, he was like $20-30 million of market cap, nothing. Over the next, from 2014 up into 2022, until the recent crash they had, they went on an absolute run because they were on mobile. And that's an example of getting focused on just one channel. And think about this for a second, between buying WhatsApp, Instagram, which are all brilliant moves, everything they did for a 10-year period was all about getting on mobile. And if you've heard recent interviews of Mark Zuckerberg, now he's going 100% trying to go virtual for the next 10 years. Is it the right play or not? I don't know. But I can tell you, this is an example of where getting focused on what is your channel to get to market, right? How do you get to market? Now, in this case, Mark Zuckerberg switched channels from traditional web browser to mobile, but he didn't do it during a recession. And so this is an example of switching channels. Either way, whether you switch or not, do it now and get laser focused. So going into a recession, you know how you're going to get to your client. And this is exactly what I did as well. I knew that that my clients didn't necessarily have the ability to pay for my services in the 2008 recession, but I had a partner, a large software vendor, who had a lot of excess cash during the recession, and they wanted to keep their product going and they wanted to keep people implementing it. And so prior to the recession, it was just pure dumb luck, we switched our channel or our play to having the software vendor subsidize/fund our implementation of their software in their customers. And we had this channel fully developed and ready to go. So when the recession hit, we utilized that channel. And when a lot of our other competitors were going under, we were thriving, and we had almost unlimited access to cash because we had developed this channel. It was pure dumb luck. I don't want to tell you that I was smart, but you can be smart by going and look at what are your channels and making sure whatever you do use or whatever does work is developed and ready to go. So when recession happens, you're not trying to diversify. Vern talks about how, get into deep verticals. I agree. And, I've also heard it said that riches are in the niches. I actually wrote a chapter on it in my book, Wake Up Call. So check that out as well. But I mean, it's so important to know your channel and where you're going. Now, in the growth tools that Vern built, my first two recommendations, you just got them. I'm going to go into the third, fourth, and fifth here in a second, but they can be found on page 7 of Vern's growth tools on the Scaling Up website. You just go there, look for the growth tools. It's a pamphlet. It costs you nothing. You can download it. You just give them your email address and they'll send you the growth tools. But on page 7, Vern has what's called the 7 Strata of Strategy. and the core customer, the brand promise, these concepts are on that page. And you can work with a scaling up coach, or you can work with excuse me, I'm just trying to think of it. You can buy Vern's book, Scaling Up, and you can use that. There's a lot of avenues to do these exercises, but that's where you'll find what I just talked about. I wish I had a whole day workshop to do this with you. When I do, I work with my clients to go through this in detail. I have them ask questions, and then they spend a lot of time having this discussion. But unfortunately, we're in a webinar, and I got about 10 minutes left to get 3 more ideas out there. So we're going to keep going. So here's the Captain Obvious one, the P&L and income statement. And in my business, we spent a lot of time. We actually were scaling up clients already in 2008. Back then, we called it Rockefeller Habits, and we had met Vern a couple years earlier. And we had already invested a lot of time into really understanding this, but not just understanding our expenses and cutting them. That's not what I'm talking about. Vern has had this slide around for a long, long time, and I'm borrowing this from Vern, so I want to make sure I give him full credit. Vern Harnish's slide, not mine, his concept, not mine. But we heard him speak about this in 2004 or 5, and we adopted this concept of you need an extra column in your financial statement or in your income statement that says who's responsible for every expense. Because entering into a recession, there will be a ton of pressure on your CFO, which is warranted, but not necessarily smart, because you need to take some of that off and you need to spread the responsibility around. Well, again, when you go into panic mode, this is the wrong time to put this extra column into your financial statement or your income statement and assign people in the business to be responsible for these different rows, not columns, but rows, and say, you're responsible for this expense. We're going to be asking you in a month how it's doing. Because here's the deal, and I'm looking for a laugh here, so this is meant to be funny, but you're not going to save money on office expenses. This is the classic one, especially people who haven't been through a recession. I always hear this like, oh man, we got to look at office expenses when they need to cut money. It's like, there's never going to happen. Like, the office expenses are so small, but for whatever reason, as business people, we think that's the first place to go. And really the reality is the first place to go when cutting expenses is the sacred cows in your business. And the CFO is going to have an uphill battle trying to do that. So some of the things that I tell you to do, and when you're doing this, identifying areas of reduction, spend time planning. You heard me say that. Create an implementation plan, meaning when the recession hits and you have a downturn in, like, we lose 20% of our orders, or 2 of our main customers go under, or whatever happens, have a plan for what does the elimination of expenses look like inside your business. When will you do it? What are the triggers that will make this happen? Because a lot of times you'll be in panic mode. You'll be in the 5 stages of grief. Where you're like, is this real? You'll be negotiating and doing all that. And it's like, no, it's real. You've got to go deal with the economic situation you're in. Obviously be creative, and have the entire team ready, be ready for sacrifice. Because again, there's going to be sacred cows. I've said it already. I'm going to say it again. This is not your CFO's problem. They obviously need to be involved in this. But if you're not prepping for the entire organization to be engaged in this challenge and help with this, you're going to have a lot of challenges if people are engaged, because the CFO can't do it on their own. And it reminds me of this cartoon. I saw this quite a few years ago, and I like to bring it up every once in a while when this type of example comes up, where maybe your person in operations is cranking out enough product, or maybe your HR person can finally hire enough people because we're in the recession, and they're on one side of the boat going, hey, things are good on this side, while your salesperson and your CFO is trying to bail you out. And you really have to balance this out and have everybody engaged. And again, we did this in the last recession because we had just heard Vern a couple of years earlier. We were adapting those Rockefeller habit principles and things he told us, and it made a huge difference. And so if you're looking for what tool to use, there's several tools. There's several tools you can use, and on page 14 of the Scaling Up growth tools is where you'd go and get one called the Power of One. and which we recommend using. It's just a good thought exercise. And I see that we got a question on what do I mean by sacred cows? I mean, like, for instance, people will be like, well, we can't cut 401k contributions. Everybody will leave. And that's the one reason people stay, is because there's 401k contributions. In the middle of a nasty recession, you may have to cut 401k contributions for 6 months. And we're actually, it's the very next topic we're going to talk about, is on people and the resources side. But that's an example of sacred cow. Another sacred cow could be, maybe you planned a retreat or a sales incentive trip, and you're like, we can never tell our salespeople that we're not doing the incentive trip. Well, maybe you have to. First off, you can't afford it. What are the optics on that? Like, well, we can't lose our salespeople, because if we lose our salespeople, we won't have sales. And if we don't have sales, then the recession will be worse on us. Well, yes, but is that a sacred cow that you're hanging on to? And would salespeople understand if you delayed it by 6 months? Because remember, most of these recessions, within 6 months to 12 months, if you have a healthy business, you do the right things, you're out of it and everything's fine. And that's how it was with mine. That's how it was with many healthy businesses in 2008, 2009. People talk about how long that recession lasts. The reality is it was over, in my opinion. I'm just one person. It was actually over pretty quickly. So the person who asked questions, they totally got it. But thank you for the question, because that's setting me up for my next thing. So I'll get to that. So that brings us to, what are you gonna do with people? And really, this is the number 4 thing. And I'll say, in my opinion, this is the number 1 thing, because going into recession, all of your staff, this is their number 1 question. What are you going to do? Are you going to lay off people? Are you going to cut 401k? Are you going to cut expenses? Are you going to cut hours? What are you going to do? And there's a couple of things I want you to be thinking about. Again, I'm a broken record, but make these decisions now, because you can do that. You can say, well, if we lost 20% of our business, would we lay people off? Would we cut salaries? Would we cut benefits? Would we put money back into the business as partners? Would we pull from our reserve funds? Bill Gates always said he had 1 year of operating expenses available in cash at any time. And I think Microsoft still does. I'm not sure they do, but Bill Gates had that for years. Again, Bill Gates, he's a troubled figure right now. I don't know if he's the best example to use, but let's take his problems that he has out there in the real world away and talk about his business values. If you have the money, operating and keeping everything the same, there could be some real value in that. Although maybe it's time to trim some people who are underperformers, and that's a legitimate strategy as well. And this is where you need to figure out, what are your values? And I'm not saying that you're a bad person or have bad values if you're going to go immediately to doing layoffs. No, I mean, it's a legitimate strategy. People do it every day. It's also a legitimate strategy to say, we're not going to lay anybody off, but we're going to do salary cuts. That's what I did. I did a 10% salary cut across the board. And I'll tell you, there was a lot of moaning and groaning when I did it. But I did it primarily because my people were looking at me, and they weren't smiling like this, but it was the best picture I could get of professionals looking at me. And this is what it looked like inside of my team meetings. They're looking at me going, what are we going to do, Wade? We obviously don't have enough work. And I said, we're going to cut salaries by 10%. I'm not saying that should be your strategy, by the way. It was just my strategy. But I'm going to tell you, it was wildly successful. And again, I did it totally by accident. I sat down with my team, my leadership team. I said, what is our strategy to get us out of this recession? And we said, look, if we cut anybody, we know we're going to come out of this recession strong, and we need all these people. We didn't really have underperformers. We had about 50 employees at the time. We didn't really have any underperformers. So looking at all that, it felt unfair to cut anybody, and we knew we needed them, and we knew our competitors were cutting. So we went ahead and we told the team, we're doing a 10% salary cut. And we told them everything. We said, look, we're doing this for this reason. We told them the strategy. We told them the why. And that's another thing I got to slide. Tell them the why you're doing whatever it is you're doing. And then I was very clear, we're going to come out of this stronger. I got to tell you, you can talk to employees who worked for me back then. We didn't lose a single person after I made the announcement. We went 6 months, and then everybody's salaries went back to normal because we were able to pop out of that pretty quickly because we worked real hard. Everyone was unified. And for 2 years, we didn't lose a single person after that. 2 years. And so, the important thing, as I said earlier, is to have a strategy and have the why you did it. because people are looking for that. And so as I wrap up this presentation, that's 4 out of the 5. The 5th one is specifically for you. And that is, you have to have focus. You have to manage your calendar and your energy. The challenge is going into recession, you're going to have some really bad habits around saying yes to the wrong meetings and saying no to the right ones because you said yes to the wrong ones. And you're going to already have a bucket that's way overflowing and you're doing way too much. We've got to get you out of this habit. You've got to learn to say no. And this is not being preachy at you. This is me letting you know, during the last recession and during recessions, I've seen this firsthand. I was able to have a clear calendar so that I could deal with the challenges of the recession. But again, when the panic mode sets in, what we do instead is we fill our calendar because we think more activity will lead to better results. And that, in fact, that's actually the opposite. In my opinion, what I've seen from recessions and what I've done and what I've seen successful people do is they open up space. They open up white space in their calendar, in their energy, so that when opportunity presents itself during the recession, they can take advantage of that, as opposed to just doing work to do work. So this is something I really think you need to start doing now, because this is a really hard habit to form. And the people have some of the biggest challenges around doing this during a recession because of the bad habit they were formed. So to leave you with something to go get this done, I'm a huge fan of the book Essentialism. There's a few people who've been naysayers about the book, but I think it's pure wisdom. You can go get Greg's book. It's very, very well written. It's a good book. It has several exercises in there to help you. But what I love about Essentialism is it teaches you what I just said you need to do. Say no to the wrong things so that you can say yes to the right things. And I take all my clients through this. You have to read Essentialism if you're going to work with Red Wagon, because if you can't say no to the wrong things so that you can say yes to the right things when they come up, I can't work with you. We can't coach you because you're doing too many of the wrong things and you'll never have time to do the right things with us. And so we always go through this. And the book gives you the reasoning and logic behind it, so you can take the psychological problem and turn it into a logical problem. And it also gives you tools on how to say no nicely inside a business. It's a brilliant book. And you don't have to read the whole thing. Pick out the chapters that work for you, like that chapter, for example. But it's intended to inspire you and give you tools. And so as I leave you and as we open it up for questions, on Essentialism, some of the key things it talks about is understanding what you're doing, why you're doing it, because probably most of what you're doing is wrong. And so why are you doing that? Is it pressure from somebody else? Do you have a hard time saying no? What is it that's there? And then when are you doing it? Because sometimes you can say yes, but you need to do it later or in the future. And so it really helps you explore those 3 concepts, and then goes, okay, let's go explore what you're doing, eliminate some of the things that you shouldn't be doing, and then execute on that. This is very easy for me to say. And by the way, I struggle with this every day. I will tell you though, I've gotten better. In fact, we had a quarterly theme. If you're a scaling up client, you should have quarterly themes. Red Wagon has quarterly themes almost every quarter. And one of our quarterly themes 2 years ago, when I was doing far too much, was Dr. No. We called it Dr. No. We used the posters from the movie, and we did a whole thing on it inside of my business here with me and the team, to really promote this idea that not just Wade, but me primarily, but the rest of the team, we need to say no more. So with that, I'm 1 minute over. I would just ask you, all kidding aside, please check out my book, Wake Up Call. Look, self-promoting, I know that, but it's a great book. I spent a lot of time writing it for entrepreneurs, people like you. And please friend me on Instagram. Red Wagon Inc. is on Instagram. Follow Red Wagon on LinkedIn. Follow me. Please go friend me on LinkedIn and connect with me and stay connected. I do videos about every day and they're hot takes. If you liked this, you liked my energy, you're going to get this. I have one from just yesterday. My dogs are in it. It's a lot of fun. Go check out that video from yesterday. But with that being said, I'll open it up to different questions. So Eugene, I don't know if you want to help me manage this or what we want to do, but I'm going to stop talking and start answering questions.
Yeah, Wade, thank you so much. Great presentation. We did have some questions that were posed by Julian, going back to when you were talking about sort of the recession is coming, you need to not diversify, but you need to focus sort of on your hedgehog, your core customer. So Julian was asking, they've been focused in their scaling up work on diversification and diversifying their product offerings and whatever else they might be. Do you suggest that they now make a big change in what they're doing with their scaling up coach in order to better prepare for the coming recession?
Yeah, and I'm really glad that question got asked, because I got to make sure I'm very clear on this. I don't want to misstate anything here. No, keep the diversification process going. Keep experimenting. Keep working on things that could tag or roll into your hedgehog or be adjacent businesses. I love that. I think experimentation and being curious is really important. Don't stop. What I'm trying to say, and if I wasn't clear, I'm sorry. Sometimes I get going too quickly and I'm not. But I want to make sure it's very clear. Experiment now, diversify now, start the process of understanding if a recession hits, what would you focus on? What would be your go-to core customer, your go-to product, your go-to sandbox, so that if and when the recession hits, and I think we all agree it's when, you can then do it then. Because diversification, in my opinion, again, this is just one guy, but my opinion is that diversification, experimentation, all that is something you'll never stop. You have to be very careful with during recession, because you will be in a psychological panic. And most people make really poor decisions because they're in fight or flight, and both situations scream, diversify, do something different, do something. And in most recessions, your best thing to do, like McDonald's, is to go back to your core and really focus on that. So, because diversification takes time, takes money, it takes energy, it takes a lot of things you don't have during a recession.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of reminds me of someone, in the real world, not in a business sense. It's almost like having a hurricane evacuation plan.
Yes.
I know it's not if it's going to happen, it's when.
Sure.
It's almost like a checklist of being prepared, because when that situation comes, I don't want to be panicked. I want to be prepared. And so that's sort of knowing that when this recession comes, this is what we're going to focus on. But until that recession comes, we can still continue exploring different channels, trying to build strategic partnerships,
Absolutely,
product lines. But if and when we have to contract because the recession is now here, this is the route that we are going to take in order to survive and flourish at the end of it.
You said it so well. You should come to my workshops. I think you might do it better than I do. That's great. Perfect explanation.
Another question Julian raised specifically about your cutting of 10% of salaries. Sort of what were the benchmarks for enacting those temporary salary reductions across the board? Was it a certain number of weeks or months of reserve capital, perhaps? Just wondering how that happened more.
Our benchmark. So this is one thing we did plan ahead. We planned some of the things ahead. So I was bragging about the stuff that we got right and the things we planned ahead on. I want to be very clear. This one was pure panic. So we went 3 months at 10%, at 10% below break even, which is below break even. And once we hit the third month, we said, okay, we can't keep doing this. And so we got together, and obviously staff reduction was in the cards. There's a lot of things we talked about, but we came back to that strategy because we had a conversation. We had a strategy conversation. What is our strategy? We didn't just do a knee jerk. And we realized that cutting anybody would hurt us on the other side, because we legitimately needed these people. By the way, not everybody does. Some people should cut. So I want to make sure it's clear. But for us, it was the right move to cut. And so anyhow, we went 3 months, 10% under our break even. And so we said, that's it. We can't do any more of that. And candidly, we probably should have done it earlier. But we were also naive we weren't as good at business as we are today. There's a bunch of things that were going on. And what was nice though, was once we enacted that strategy, obviously we got the 10% back, because we were most of our costs were wrapped up in people. We were a services business. So that 10% cut went quickly to that deficit. But what happened was, once we did that and we told the team and told them a strategy, pardon the pun, but we got a wake-up call inside the business, and we saw a 10% increase the other direction of revenue and profitability beyond just the 10% cut. So we had a 20% swing. So we went almost immediately back to profitability because of the cut and the swing up. I'm not saying you're going to get that, but I believe, and I have no science to back it up, it's just my opinion, But I believe when you have a thought through strategy that you can explain to your staff or your partners or whatever you call the people you work with, your team, if you can explain it to them, you will see a bump. I can't guarantee it, but you will see a bump because they'll be like, okay, there's a plan and we're just got to go execute. And all of a sudden they do. Because remember, their neighbors are getting laid off. Their friends are losing their job or are worried about it. And so panic is setting in everywhere once a recession sets in. I think we all forget about how bad that is. Because again, that was 14 years ago.
And Wade, I presume that probably the fact that you were willing to make 10% cuts in salary rather than letting people go, although it was probably a morale hit, it was probably less than actually having to cut staff in general and having to let people go and fire, because seeing your colleagues walk out the door during a recession is a lot more difficult than just knowing that everybody's putting in the team effort and taking a 10% cut altogether.
I absolutely believe that's the case. I still do 14 years later. I believe that what you just stated is absolutely true. I will also tell you, though, we didn't have any significant underperformers. And I warn people all the time, if you're going to do this, because just in the last mini recession we had during COVID, I had a couple of my clients come to me and say, should I do layoffs? And I told the same story in the whole bit. We talked through it. And one of my clients did the same thing. They did salary cuts and they were very successful, and they're killing it right now. They're doing very, very well. And I'm not saying it's because of that. I'm just saying what they did. But the reason why I bring that all up is I have seen people try to do that same strategy with underperformers. And the problem is if you have underperformers that you've kept around, and then all of a sudden you do that strategy because you want that morale boost. And you're right, Eugene, we absolutely got it. I believe that's the reason. But if you do the same thing we did and have underperformers, I believe, and I've seen the opposite happen, where people are like, well, wait a second, I'm getting my pay cut and that joker's still working here. So, it's a touchy subject and people don't like talking about it, but I'm here to tell you again, I mean, I can only have 5 areas. And I only have so much time to talk, 45 minutes, but I'm telling you, I would also really tell you, if you want to do something pre-recession to be recession resistant, one of the best ways to be recession resistant is to move your underperformers out now. And I know we're in a tight labor market. It's like, wait, I can't afford not to have these people. Like, even if they do terrible work, they're doing some work, then you're going to have to lay them off later when the recession hits. So you're just choosing to lay them off later, which is fine. It's a legitimate strategy, but it's just know that you're choosing to lay them off later.
Thank you, Julian. We do have just a few minutes more, so if you have questions, please, hopefully the chat is now working. I think it is. I got that figured out. Or use the Q&A. I'm happy to pose a question, Wade, and it's sort of on the tail end. We've talked about how to prepare for the coming recession and what to do to sort of have that plan. How do you know when you're coming out of the recession so that you then transition the other direction? From the, okay, we were diversifying and now we're contracting because the recession is here. What are the indicators that will tell me that, you know what, the market is settling out, things are coming back to whatever the new normal might be, and it's time to then sort of transition the other way and start thinking about really flourishing out of the recession?
Yeah, I don't have an exact answer, but again, I have an opinion. I always rely back on the old saying, it's a funny one, may not be true, but it's a funny saying that nothing happens in America until somebody sells something, right? And it's, salespeople say it because they want to think they're special. They are special in their own way. But there's some truth to the statement. And so that's why in my number 1 point about revenue generation, I had several sub-points. And one of the sub-points was get your KPIs in place now. Because to answer your question, I don't believe you will know if you don't have good leading and lagging KPIs, and leading are going to be the best. Because if you've done a good job pre-recession, becoming recession resistant, and have really great KPIs and you put the work in, by the way, team, this is hard work. Very few scaling up clients ever really do the hard work of getting good KPIs, and a line will help you track them, and you should put them in a line and keep tracking them there, and scaling up scoreboard. So make sure you have that tool in place and you're tracking of it there. But the KPIs, that's what is going to tell you. You'll know you'll just know we're coming out. And then you can, because leading indicators will tell you that if you have the right ones and you put the work in. Outside of that, I don't know any other way to know other than nothing happens in America until someone sells something. So you could just go on that. If sales are looking good, then you're probably coming out of it. But I would rely on KPIs and dashboards is the term I was looking for earlier when I got all stubbled. You need dashboards and scoreboards like Align to really help you know this kind of stuff.
All right, Wade, we had a quick question. What's the message that you would give to motivate your sales team so that they say, we love working at this company, not we like working here?
That's a good one.
It doesn't sound like it has anything to do with recession, but a great question.
So, boy, I tell you, I've got a lot of opinions on sales. But you just stumped me because I have so many opinions on sales, and I'm blanking. I would tell you though, my knee-jerk thing to say to this is another cliche, but it's compensation drives behavior. And by the way, any salespeople I don't get offended by what I'm about to say. I'm sorry, I'm about to offend you, but I've always found salespeople are pretty much degenerates. So I don't know if you can ever really truly make them happy, but you can create an environment where they can create their own happiness. And that's what I believe about sales. So I have some very opinionated opinions on sales. I've been in sales. I've managed sales teams. So I have nothing against sales. I think they're very, very critical. But if you want them to love the company, I believe you have to create an environment where they can make their own happiness. And so having clear compensation plans, having clear metrics and goals, not changing things. Like, for instance, one thing I always with my sales team, and I advocate for this, only change sales plans, only change anything in sales once a year and pre-announce it. And always say when salespeople are hired, we only change things once a year. We reserve the right to change your compensation or your commission or whatever once a year, but we only do it once a year. Here's the date, here's the time. We'll tell you beforehand. So we'll announce it here. It'll change here. You do it consistently every year. And your salespeople, I believe, will love you. Now, if you go look at my LinkedIn and find some salespeople who work for me, you can find plenty who didn't love me or love my company, but you can find quite a few who did. And what they'll tell you is they loved that we did that. So I would just say I default to creating an environment where they can create their own happiness and their own love. And the good salespeople will do that. And then the final thing, and sorry, I'm going on, I'm done with this last statement. There's another scaling up partner who does sales testing. Ping me on the side and I'll give you the person's name. You can go talk to them, but they test salespeople to see where they rank and how they're going to perform prior to ever hiring them, or even after you hire them. They'll give you an idea of what a salesperson is going to do, because it's something you can measure. And I'll tell you a story about how I took the test and got measured, and found out a lot about myself. But I would recommend doing that as well, because if you're looking to get your sales team to love you and love the company, then you need to know them, and you can't know them without testing. They're not going to want to do it and they're going to fight it, but test your salespeople. They're probably the number one group of people in the business who should be tested prior to being hired. And if you didn't do it prior to hiring, you should test them afterwards. Salespeople need constant management. So you need to know more about them.
I think it also more broadly goes to the culture in the business. I think if you really want people to love working there, whether they're salespeople, whether they're marketing people, whether they're operations people, it's all about the culture that you're building within the organization.
For sure. Yeah. I went to micro and you're at macro or whatever, right? I went down to the very specific Europe high. I agree 100%. That's critical as well.
All right. We have reached the top of the hour. And so I want to thank everybody for attending today's coach webinar. A huge thank you to Wade for a great presentation.
Thank you.
As he noted, you can learn more about him by visiting his website. That's redwagonadvisors.com. You can find him on LinkedIn as well. As always, we encourage you to use the Align software or the Scaling Up Scoreboard software to implement some of the great business habits that Wade discussed. So for example, under the strategy tab in the software, you can find the 7 Strata of Strategy document. You can find the Cash Power of One document that's there in the software. And obviously with our new KPI dashboards, you can build those dashboards that Wade was talking about in order to have all the numbers visually displayed, and they're easy for you to be able to make decisions based on what that data is showing you. Of course, if you need assistance or more information, please don't hesitate to contact us at support@aligntoday.com. Thank you again. We hope that you will join us for our next coach webinar in October. More information will be provided about that shortly. Until then, we hope you have a great day. And thanks so much, Wade.